Today, we're diving into a fascinating and often controversial topic: the longest-serving presidents in African history. Why do some leaders remain in power for decades? What impact do their extended tenures have on their countries? Long-serving presidents can profoundly shape a nation's political landscape, economy, and society, leaving a lasting legacy that can be both remarkable and contentious. In this video, we'll explore the lives and legacies of the top 15 longest-serving African leaders. From their political achievements to the controversies that marked their reigns, we'll uncover what made these presidents stand out and how their long periods in office have influenced their nations and the continent as a whole. The long tenures of these African presidents are often rooted in a combination of factors that contribute to political stability. Many of these leaders came to power during times of turmoil and used their long periods in office to stabilize their countries. In some cases, political stability was achieved through a mix of effective governance and strong military influence. For instance, a leader's control over the armed forces often helped suppress opposition and maintain power. Additionally, the lack of term limits in many African nations has allowed these leaders to extend their presidencies, often through constitutional amendments or political maneuvering. The impact of these long-serving presidents on modern African politics and society is both profound and complex. On one hand, their lengthy rule allowed for continuity and, in some cases, significant development. However, this stability often came at a cost, including political repression, corruption, and challenges to democratic processes. As we examine each leader's tenure, we'll see how their rule shaped economic policies, social structures, and international relations, and how their legacies continue to influence their countries today. Paul Biya has been at the helm of Cameroon for over 4 decades, making him one of Africa's longest-serving leaders. His tenure has been marked by efforts to modernize the economy and maintain stability in a country with diverse ethnic groups. However, Biya's presidency has also been criticized for its lack of political reforms and increasing allegations of human rights abuses and corruption. The recent unrest and calls for change reflect the challenges of his prolonged rule. Teodoro Obiang Nguema Mbasogo has led Equatorial Guinea since a military coup in 1979. Under his leadership, the country has seen significant oil-driven economic growth. Despite this, his rule has faced severe criticism for its authoritarian nature, widespread corruption, and human rights violations. The disparity between the nation's wealth and the living conditions of its citizens highlights the complex legacy of his presidency. Yoweri Museveni has been Uganda's president since 1986, and his tenure has seen both economic growth and political controversy. Museveni initially promised democratic reforms and has overseen improvements in infrastructure and healthcare. However, his presidency has also been marred by allegations of electoral manipulation, suppression of political opposition, and criticism over his extended rule. The ongoing debates about term limits and governance reflect the polarized views on his leadership. Omar Bongo Ondimba's presidency spanned over 4 decades, making him one of Africa's longest-serving leaders before his death in 2009. His tenure was characterized by efforts to maintain political stability and economic development in Gabon. However, his rule faced significant criticisms for corruption, lack of political freedoms, and an entrenched political elite. The legacy of his presidency continues to influence Gabon's political landscape. Hosni Mubarak's presidency in Egypt lasted for 30 years, during which he oversaw significant economic and infrastructural developments. His tenure brought stability to Egypt, but was also marked by widespread political repression, economic disparities, and lack of political freedoms. The Arab Spring of 2011, which led to his ousting, underscored the growing discontent and the demand for democratic change. Muammar Gaddafi's rule over Libya began with a military coup in 1969 and extended until his ousting in 2011. Gaddafi's tenure was marked by his radical revolutionary policies and efforts to transform Libya into a socialist state. His government implemented significant infrastructure projects, including housing and healthcare improvements, and pursued a policy of Arab nationalism and anti-imperialism. However, Gaddafi's regime was also characterized by brutal repression, a lack of political freedoms, and widespread human rights abuses. His rule ended in a violent uprising during the Arab Spring, which led to his death and a chaotic aftermath for Libya. Robert Mugabe's presidency began with high hopes for Zimbabwe's independence and development, following his role in the country's liberation struggle. Initially praised for his efforts to improve education and healthcare, Mugabe's later years in office saw severe economic mismanagement and political instability. The country experienced hyperinflation, land reform policies that led to a collapse in agriculture, and widespread corruption. Despite his initial achievements, Mugabe's extended rule was marred by violent crackdowns on dissent and economic ruin, leading to his eventual resignation under mounting pressure. Idi Amin's presidency began with a military coup in 1971, and his rule is often remembered for its brief yet turbulent impact on Uganda. Amin's regime initially promised reform and development, but quickly descended into a brutal dictatorship. His government was notorious for its human rights abuses, including mass killings and torture. The political instability and economic mismanagement under Amin led to widespread suffering and international condemnation. His rule ended with his overthrow by the Tanzanian military and a Ugandan rebel force, leaving a deeply scarred nation. Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana's first president, played a pivotal role in the country's independence from British colonial rule and became a prominent figure in Pan-Africanism. His tenure was marked by ambitious development projects and efforts to unite African nations. Nkrumah's vision included modernization and industrialization, though his policies also led to economic difficulties and growing authoritarianism. His presidency was cut short by a coup in 1966, which ousted him from power and led to a shift in Ghana's political direction. Julius Nyerere, Tanzania. Tenure: 1964-1985. Julius Nyerere, Tanzania's founding president, is celebrated for his role in nation-building and his vision of African socialism. His policies, including the Ujamaa program, aim to create a collective agricultural system and promote social equality. Nyerere's leadership contributed to Tanzania's initial stability and social development. However, his policies also face significant challenges, including economic difficulties and inefficient agricultural practices. Despite these issues, Nyerere is remembered for his commitment to education and healthcare and his advocacy for African unity. Hissène Habre's presidency in Chad was marked by early successes in consolidating power and stabilizing the country after years of civil conflict. His government implemented various development initiatives and gained support from Western nations during the Cold War. However, his rule was marred by severe human rights abuses, including political repression, torture, and extrajudicial killings. Habre's regime eventually fell in 1990, and he faced international condemnation for his actions, leading to his later trial and conviction for crimes against humanity. Daniel Arap Moi, Kenya. Tenure: 1978-2002. Daniel Arap Moi's presidency spanned over 2 decades, during which he implemented significant economic and infrastructural development in Kenya. His tenure saw advancements in education and healthcare, and he maintained relative stability in a country with diverse ethnic groups. However, Moi's rule was also characterized by widespread corruption, political repression, and suppression of dissent. His long tenure ended with his departure from office in 2002, leaving a mixed legacy that continues to influence Kenyan politics. King Mswati III has ruled Eswatini, formerly Swaziland, since 1986, making him one of the longest reigning monarchs in Africa. His tenure has been marked by efforts to modernize the country and implement development policies aimed at improving infrastructure and healthcare. Mswati III leadership has also focused on promoting traditional values and culture, which has played a significant role in shaping Eswatini's identity. However, his rule has been contentious due to the absolute monarchy system he maintains. Critics argue that his governance style undermines democratic principles, with significant concerns about human rights abuses, political repression, and lack of political freedoms. The concentration of power and the monarchy's opulence amidst widespread poverty have fueled ongoing debates and calls for political reform. Laurent Désiré Kabila's presidency began with the overthrow of longtime dictator Mobutu Sese Seko in 1997, which was hailed as a liberation for the Democratic Republic of Congo. His leadership initially promised political renewal and stability. However, Kabila's rule quickly became marred by internal conflict and allegations of corruption. His presidency struggled with political instability and economic challenges, contributing to a series of violent conflicts known as the Second Congo War. Kabila's tenure ended abruptly with his assassination in 2001, leaving the country in a state of turmoil. His death ushered in his son, Joseph Kabila, who continued to face many of the same issues of instability and governance that characterized his father's rule. The legacy of Laurent Désiré Kabila's presidency remains complex, reflecting both the promise of change and the challenges of leadership in a deeply troubled nation. Ahmed Sékou Touré was Guinea's first president, taking office following the country's independence from France in 1958. His tenure is noted for his significant role in the early nation-building process and his efforts to establish a post-colonial national identity. Touré's government initially focused on social and economic development, implementing policies aimed at modernizing the country and promoting African socialism. Despite these achievements, Touré's presidency was also marked by authoritarianism and economic difficulties. His rule was characterized by a lack of political freedoms, widespread repression, and human rights abuses. The economic challenges faced during his tenure, combined with his oppressive governance style, left a mixed legacy. His regime's eventual downfall came with his death in 1984, paving the way for a new era in Guinean politics. We've now explored the lives and legacies of Africa's longest-serving presidents, each with their own complex impact on their nations. From modernization and nation-building to controversial practices and political repression, their extended tenures offer valuable insights into the dynamics of leadership on the continent. If you enjoyed this deep dive into African political history, don't forget to like and subscribe to Curiosity Chronicles. Your support helps us bring you more intriguing content on history, politics, and beyond. Let us know in the comments which leader's legacy